So the first thing I want to explore is how fear affects our communication. So what you probably notice is that as you've been looking this up, you probably had a lot of anxiety or moments where you freaked yourself out, right? Where maybe you felt a lot of panic in your system, right? You maybe got a hot flash or something, or you felt kind of lightheaded, something along these lines. Maybe you gave yourself a full-blown anxiety attack, or maybe you just really worried yourself, right? To the point where you're like, I don't really know what to do. Now, when you got to this place, one of the things I want to point out is that you probably felt very compulsive in your need to talk to other people about it. You probably just really wanted to talk to someone about it, right? Really communicate what you heard and tell them about it. Now, why did you feel this way? Well, it's often because when we're feeling fearful, we want to experience that fear with someone else, right? It's like safety in numbers, if you will. If we can relay information that freaked us out to someone else, we can feel safer because we're going through it together. Right? This is human nature. We really want to, shared experience so it's a little less scary. Safety in numbers. Now, when this happens, you have to notice how you're actually communicating. Because very rarely are you taking exactly what you heard and then translating it to another person. What you might have noticed is that you're actually taking it, interpreting it, then projecting it to the other person. Now, the act of projecting it to the other person looks like you most likely enhancing the language, intensifying the language, making it a little scarier. Have you noticed yourself doing this? Have you ever caught yourself doing this, or even caught another person doing this? The reason people do this is because we are trying to be around people who are experiencing the same things we are experiencing. We want to feel safe in numbers. And so oftentimes we're not communicating the facts. Rather, we're communicating what we feel. And we're doing that because we're trying to get people to the same level as experience as we are going through, because this makes us feel safe. The problem with this is that when this effect happens, we play a big game of telephone in which we hear the information at hand, then we convert it into a fearful narrative or story. We might even say, could you imagine if your business shut down? Could you imagine if you lost your place? Or if we couldn't find food? Or if, we got sick ourselves and stuff? Could you imagine all these things? We start to create a narrative with the facts as the way we communicate. Now, the problem with this is with every iteration, it gets worse and worse and worse. It makes people fearful and more fearful and more fearful. So what I want to suggest to you is you want to be very accurate in your communication. But rather also ask yourself, is this communication something that actually helps people be proactive? Or is it just communication that's scary? Are you really just trying to communicate your fears? Or are you really just trying to help someone? Really ask these questions. Because when we start to examine what people do when they're fearful, we often notice it's not really about trying to give them information that helps them, but rather give them information that shares the experience we're going through. Now, if it's not productive, if it's not actually helping someone, then what you'll notice is that it's really just promoting fear. And oftentimes when we look at this, we have to ask, what is the purpose of fear in these kind of experiences, right? When we go through some sort of chaotic experience, does fear actually help us? Now, to one degree it does. It helps us get serious about certain things we can control, like social distancing, washing our hands compulsively, self-quarantining, these sort of elements. But the other thing to note is that fear does have a limit of how good it is for us. One of the things you probably notice is that you're very focused on this issue right now. Maybe that's what brought you to this video. You're very intensely studying every article you can get your hands on. You're looking into so many different factors. And when you're doing this, it's not necessarily making you feel calmer about this situation, but rather it's most likely inhibiting your action. It's making you fearful. It's making you feel nihilistic, or like there's no point, or that, we're all screwed, or you're painting some sort of picture. This is where fear really messes us up. It causes a consistent stress. And so what I want to point out to you is that more than ever, you're going to need your immunity here. And you want to keep your immunity at a tip-top place. This is why you need to have your mind right. And so one of the things you can do is to reduce the stress you're feeling. If you can reduce your stress, you're going to have your immunity at a tip-top place. But in order to do this, you gotta manage your fear. So what I'm going to suggest to you is to look at your actual behaviors that cause fear. Look at what's causing it. On one side, you'll notice that if you just get the facts, it might help you alleviate some of your concerns about, well, am I allowed to go out in public, or am I allowed to do this or that? You kind of get the new protocols for how the government is managing this. On the other side, and also your role in this. On the other side, you'll notice there's an element of the news that just makes you fearful. They just reiterate these facts in scary ways. This is because the news is essentially that big game of telephone. It's taking information and it's painting it in a very fearful light, something that they know you'll get scared of. And then you'll feel very compelled to continue watching, to continue focused on it. Because the news is very aware that when you're fearful, they have your attention. A lot of people have this idea in their head that their mind is incapable of actually focusing, right? It's like, oh, I don't have enough focus or discipline to focus on this business or to focus on this, project I'm working on, my homework or something along these lines. But I'll tell you what, you have no problem focusing on this, do you? Now, this is because we are hard-coded to focus on what gives us pain. Let's talk about another area around what's going on internally with us. When we talk about our minds not being right with this, it's because to be a human being is to really have two of these major traits, which is a very vivid memory and a very vivid imagination. Our memory allows us to experience the past, right? So as we recall a memory, we actually can feel the emotions that memory called us, right? That memory made us experience. But at the same time, our imagination allows us to imagine the future and to experience the future. Now, these are powerful, powerful tools. It's what makes us human. But at the exact same time, they will also use us if we don't use them correctly. And in situations where we are fearful, in situations where we become more primal in nature, we become less evolved, these two traits will run us. This is why it's very important to manage fear. Because when we are at a higher, more elevated state of consciousness, when we are more self-aware of the faculties of our mind that make up our reality, that make up how we perceive the world, when we become aware of those mechanisms, right, our very vivid imagination and our very vivid memory, when we become aware of them, we are able to use them effectively instead of them using us. This is what's needed right now. Because when we talk about how we react in fear, we actually lower ourselves when we experience fear. We actually go back down to a less evolved, more primal version of human beings. And in that state, we don't have control of those two faculties. But at a more calm state, at a more relaxed place, a more elevated place, a still place, if you will, we do have more control of this. We can see those mechanisms operating. And then we can use them more effectively. So, what I want to suggest to you is that what's important right now is to get the information you need so that you can make the decisions you need that are in your control. But at the same time, to be also smart about this in the sense of recognizing the limitations of what fear and stress does for us, right? So it's only as good as the ability of action it promotes. Up until that point, it's totally useless for us. It lowers our immunity and makes our life harder. The other thing I want to point out is, what are your days looking like when you're watching the news, right? When you're obsessing about this and you're looking up every little article. How do you actually feel? Does it make you feel safer? Does it make you feel, like you have more control over the situation? Or do you actually feel like you have less control? One of the things I'll point out to you is if you tell yourself, well, I'm not looking up any of this stuff. I'm just going to say you're self-quarantined at home. It's very tempting to want to look this stuff up. In fact, it's kind of being broadcast to you at all channels. The thing I want to point out to you is take a day where you don't look up this stuff. Right? And you just stay at home, so nothing really is going to change in your reality. But watch what happens. You will genuinely think that the situation's getting better. You'll actually start to believe, you're like, oh yeah, it's not that serious. And you still have the facts you once had, but now you just perceive this as a little less serious, and you can kind of go about your day. Now, I'm not talking about go about your day in a way where you're going out and you're socializing with people and you're being irresponsible. You can still be responsible and do your part with stuff, but you're just less fearful. You're now at a more elevated state. Your imagination isn't being overactivated to make you feel pain, to make you feel worry. Instead, you're now thinking about like, okay, well, how can I start a business online? How can I, go and do something else? Maybe learn a new skill or pick up a creative passion. You're thinking about what's possible now for you given the circumstances. Now you'll notice when you start to think along those lines, it's a more optimistic outcome. You're kind of looking at what is the current situation, what is the reality of things, and then what can you do with that, right? There's more possibility there. This is where you are using your vivid imagination, right? And this is really what I want to suggest to you, is that we want to be socially conscious, we want to do our part, we want to control everything that we can control. But at the same time, we want to make sure we are not stressing ourselves over things we can't control. And so, what you can do is really just dedicate maybe 5 minutes a day to just getting the facts, and then that's it, and having the discipline to not look into it. Then also having the discipline to really catch yourself in your communications. Are you helping someone be informed, right? Maybe you learned something about how the government is going to help businesses, and you know of a business owner, so you say, hey, I heard, do you get the update that they're doing this for businesses, and you can go to this website to apply, or something along these lines. That's helpful information. But the death total is raised up to this amount here, and it's affecting young people now, and there's this new strain of it, and all this kind of stuff. Is that actually going to help someone and help their imagination come up with solutions? Is it going to lower their evolution or raise their evolution? These are the questions you want to ask yourself in your communication. So, limit your input, right? Understand what you're inputting into your mind. This will help you control your situation, help you be a leader in your own life, so that you become someone who has strength amidst chaos. The second thing you can do is actually look at your communication. Are you enhancing your language? Are you flowering it up? Are you communicating things that needed to be communicated? Or are you really just trying to manage your own fear, right? So another thing we can also do with this is we can learn to breathe around this. Hopefully you're not sick or anything, but as you start to read this information and you notice yourself getting scared or anxious, if you can let your nose regulate your oxygen levels and just exclusively breathe through your nose and keep calm about something and take nice deep breaths while you're going through this information, what you'll be able to do is train yourself to not react very impulsively, to not act in a fearful way where you feel compulsive to talk about it with people. Why you want to do this is because when you feel anxious, if I were to look at a person who is feeling very anxious or having a panic attack, they'd be breathing very quickly and very shallow. This sort of thing. They would start, their breathing would rapidly increase. And in doing this, this would force their physiology to feel anxious, and this is what can set off a panic attack. So what I want to promote to you is that as you go through the news, as you read up on this information, as you look up the videos and such, to really, keep your breathing in the top of your mind here. Just breathe fully. And you can even breathe with me now. And what you actually want to do is you want to see if you can breathe from your stomach, right, from your diaphragm here. Just you want to feel it going in and out sort of thing. You don't want to be breathing from your shoulders coming up like that, right? Breathe nice and deeply and remain calm throughout this. This is how you keep your mind right. And on top of this is just understanding your inputs, understanding your physiology, keeping your stress levels low, keeping healthy, making healthy decisions, right? And also being somebody who's optimistic in this, seeing the potential good outcomes of this. And you don't know what the potential good outcomes of this could be. There's lots of different things that can come about this. Even though it looks like a lot of pain and a lot of issues in the world and our economy is collapsing and yada yada, all these different things, we don't yet know how this could benefit us. Maybe this is what allows us to prepare for a different pandemic in the future that saves billions of lives from our efforts now. Maybe this is something that, offers people an insight into what's really important now that we have time to just take a break and stay home and just kind of like really examine things. We can really examine our lives. We can really, this might have been the time you needed to get some clarity about the directionality of your life or about what's important to you, right? There's a lot of these benefits we can get when we have time like this. So this is what I have for you. Hopefully you found this insightful. Hopefully it's provided some clarity for you. And really, moving forward with this, like I said, there's things you can do and there's things you can't do. And what we can control, we want to really put our energy and effort towards. And if we can't, we have to let it go. Pragmatically speaking, it's of no use to worry about it. So my point to you is right now, I want you to stay safe, stay healthy. Wishing you all the best. Take care.